I gave you three questions, right, to think about. So one was, which I like to ask people, right? So one was, what's the story behind your name? The second was, what's on your heart? And then the third option was, you could bring any object that you wanted, and then you just sort of share why it matters to you. So what was yours? Was your name, right? Was that, what
No,
did you
I
choose?
didn't want to.
What
I
did you
didn't
choose?
choose any of them. I just rejected all of them.
I've got receipts. Let me check WhatsApp.
Number one, the name.
Yeah.
The name.
What's the story behind your name?
So my name, Mactuno Henry Suit. Mactuno
Are you
means,
Henry? I didn't know you were
yeah,
Henry.
Henry, like the king, like Henry VIII.
No, not like Henry VIII. Let's not go there.
My mum always looked up to Henry VIII, so she called me after Henry VIII. But anyway, no, so Mactuno is a Ugandan name. So my dad's from northern Uganda, and it's a tribe called the Acholi tribe. And Mactuno means perseverance. And in Ugandan culture, you give someone a name according to the circumstance of birth. So in my dad's culture, you could be called Famine. That could be your name because that's what happened. So I think when I was born, my dad was unemployed. And so my mum wanted to kind of demonstrate that she was kind of having trust in God and faith for the future. So she called me Perseverance. So it was kind of like an aspirational name to describe the state of mind that she wanted to have whilst I was being born. My dad was unemployed. So all my sisters, I've got 3 sisters, they have similar names that were named around circumstance of birth, or some sort of aspiration for the future. Henry is a English name. My mum's English. That was her dad's middle name. And then Suit's an interesting surname. So again, in my dad's culture, if you go back, imagine a village setting in Uganda. When my dad's mum was looking for a boyfriend, she might be hanging out in the village with her friends. If a potential guy came to the village, she would run and hide, and she'd say, "Oh, go and see what he's like. Go and see what he's like." But if he's not wearing a suit, reject him. I don't want to talk to him. So she had the nickname Suit. This is my dad's mum in the tribe because she was seen as a proud woman who would only date a man in a suit. And then when my dad was born, he was the firstborn. And so the people in the tribe called him Suit because he was the son of the proud woman. And then when he took his British passport, his African surname was Abuka, but he double-barreled it and he took the name Abuka Suit. So that's literally the history.
Yeah.
So I'm called Suit because my grandma was a proud woman and my dad carried that nickname in his tribe.
And Mactuno is Perseverance.
Mactuno's Perseverance. And then, similarly with my own children, like I've followed a similar custom where they've got Ugandan names and they have sort of a deeper meaning behind it.
Calling children names after royalty is an interesting one because it's not even just a British thing, right? My brothers, so one of my brothers, his name is Charles, and he was named after King Charles, well, now King Charles. One of my names is Richard, named after Richard Lionheart, although most of I go by Kenny. My brother's name is Robert, named after Robert the Bruce. And it's interesting, that one, isn't it? Just how, particularly African parents, there was still this imperialism and this kind of looking up to the British Empire and therefore wanting to name children after royalty.
So I'll tell you something really interesting on that subject. My dad, he passed in 2022, and his name was Agre. And what's interesting was he was quite rare because I think on his birth certificate in colonial Uganda, they all had Christian names like Charles or, I don't know, Roger. I always find it weird, like a black guy called Roger in a Ugandan village. Phil, Ian, But my mum my grandma being a proud woman, she refused to give her firstborn an English name. So she called him Agre. Agre was the father of Pan-Africanism. So he was the mentor for Kwame Nkrumah. a guy called James Aggrey. He was kind of, he's known as like the father of African education, the father of Pan-Africanism. But it was that whole movement in the 60s where post-colonialism, there was a movement of people to say like Africa for Africans. Let's try and bring some of, people coming to study in the West, go back over there, diaspora moving back to Africa. There was, Gaddafi looking at an African currency. There was a big movement around Pan-Africanism at the time. So yeah, interesting. My dad, had a Pan-African name versus a Christian name. But it's complex, it's like I think we don't really, well, we kind of do talk about it, we don't talk about it, but the legacy of colonialism, the power of names, the significance of kind of like displacement, where people have different names that aren't their names, but ascribed to them by somebody else or represent something else. I think it leads to a lot of complexity and confusion.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking. So the story behind my name, and that wasn't my option, and my option is what's on your heart. But I want to share the story behind my name as well, which is so Temowo is a Nigerian name, specifically a Yoruba name, which means hold on to what's in your hand. So
Okay.
like don't let go. So hold on to what's in your hand. And Kenny is actually just a shortened version of Kende, which is anyone that's a twin in Nigeria is called Kende. So
okay.
So Kende actually means basically second born. Similar to the whole being named after circumstance. So the twin is usually called Taiwo, which means Toayewo, the one who goes out into the world. And the Nigerian story behind that is, the law behind that is that when you're a twin, the Taiwo, the firstborn, goes out into the world, but it's Kenny, Kende, who tells Taiwo to go out to see if it's time to come out, if it's safe to come out of the womb. And so Taiwo goes out to go out and see. He doesn't come back, so Kenny clearly thinks, okay, time to come out. So it's funny, isn't it?
Do you think that story reflects your name or how you approach the world?
Yeah, it's funny. For me it does, but I don't know if that would be true for other Kennys. Like for me, I'm very much a go out and do things, move first, don't wait, lead others, influence others. So in one way it doesn't, because in the story, Kenny tells Taiwo to go out and doesn't go and do it himself first. In another way it does, I guess, because I'm quite okay with telling others telling other people what to do. But it's been an interesting dynamic for me and my brother's relationship as well, just in terms of how we're different.
Did you like being called Kenny?
Yeah, I did. I didn't mind, actually. Yeah, because what I didn't like is when people would butcher my surname. It's like you know when you're calling HMRC or you're calling anyone, and it's like, I mean, your name's easier because it's Suit, but it's like, Temowa, how hard is that? I mean, you can't. I mean, I don't want to go there.
With Matuno, people decide to butcher it. I remember being in school, and I don't know why teachers would do this, but I had teachers who, when they said my first name, they would just add on any African sounding syllables to my name. So it'd be like Maka Bobok Tunde Bango. That's not.
Bro, come on, it wasn't that bad.
No, serious. I'm serious. I'm like, there's no bongo drums being played here. Like, how did you get there? Phonetically, how did you get there? I mean,
so listen, you're some people will know this. So your background, therapist, but also in the business world, transformation, consulting, working across the product space. I want to talk about a range of the stuff you do and just have us have that conversation around career and things like that. But how would you talk about you and what you do, but also how you work? And you and I have talked about career and finding different roles and how you put yourself out there, what kind of roles you feel. Talk to me a bit about that.
So I'll talk about it this way. So I'm mixed race, and growing up, it was like I lived between two cultures in the home. So I had two languages being spoken. I could be in like a upper middle class English setting, and then I could be in like a African setting, all within the space of like a day. So I grew up on a boundary. And when I was in school, I was both like the jock and the nerd. So literally no one could place me. Like I was like top on the athletics field, but then I was like the scholarship student. And I kind of just fell between gaps. I didn't really fit anywhere. And even being mixed race it's a complex experience. It's a longer conversation. And weirdly, when I started to actually apply myself to, like, whether it's the world of health as a therapist, whether it's the world of business as like a consultant or working transformation, I've followed almost a similar path where I tend to be good at working on edges or boundaries. Sometimes frustratingly so, because I think organizations and institutions are built around having kind of guarded silos with gatekeepers that protect knowledge, protect entry. And if you think across them, you can, heaven forbid anyone try to think outside their box or think outside their lane or play outside their function. And I remember once I was talking to a therapy supervisor and I said, "Oh, I'm so frustrated because I just feel like I always live on a boundary." And she said to me something so profound. She said to me, "Mactuno, in history and throughout civilizations, boundaries are where trade happens, boundaries where innovation happens, boundaries in terms of ecosystem is where you find life, it's where you find diversity." So she just said, lean into and embrace being on a boundary. And so I suppose I share that story because at my heart, my career has been, I'm a psychologist at heart. And then I just kind of I've entered different sectors, whether that's in therapy or business, seen problems, solved them, and then kind of moved on to the next thing. So I'm kind of a psychologist who solves problems. But because psychology is just about people, everything is psychology. Product is psychology. The heart of marketing, was inspired by psychoanalytic thinking around the unconscious and subliminal messages. Good service design is about psychology and being focused on the end user. HR, which I've worked in more recently, is, naturally you could say it's quite psychological because it's about people. Strangely, actually, sometimes HR is the least psychological bit of an organization.
We should talk about that. Yeah, no, we should talk about that.
But yeah, that's what I'd say. I'm a psychologist. I solve problems, and
well, and you had, I remember you had. Do you remember Manfred Kept de Vries? So for those
Manfred Kept
people
de Vries,
listening,
I spoke
Manfred
to him.
Kept de
Yes,
Vries.
Manfred,
Do you remember that?
the man,
Yeah.
the big man.
Well, he's like, so for people listening, Manfred, just check him out online. He's a famous kind of psychologist, consultant. But yeah, what did he tell you? He said something about the intersection, right?
I was talking to him once, and I just said, "Look, I'm like a psychoanalyst that's worked with trying to develop treatment for psychopaths, and also I've worked in business transformation and change and people and culture and organizations. Where do I fit?" And he said, "Like, you fit where you fit. Like, that unique skill set, the way you can smash those things together, the things that emerge when you combine those skills, that's where you play." I found that incredibly refreshing because people like Manfred, people like my supervisor, teachers in school, there've been people throughout my life who've kind of said to me, figuratively speaking, it's okay to be mixed race. It's okay.
Yeah. And where do we fit thing, when you're talking about the tensions, working on the edges of boundaries, your own mixed race background, like for me, I felt that on a number of levels. One, coming from a creative background, so a number of non-obvious levels as well, coming from a creative background into a corporate world, and not feeling like I fit in from that perspective. There's the obvious physical piece, being a black man in a world where you tend to be the minority. There's a whole number of stories we've got around that, right? And then a person of faith. We're both believers. We're both Christians, and that's a big part of our lives and our families. Being in a world and an environment where even today, because of the different things that are going on and certain groups that have co-opted that, I don't even often talk about it as much publicly in recent times, just because of some of the things going on in certain parts of the world. But you talked about the HR piece, and that's another piece where I feel quite a tension, and we've talked about this a lot, around just the, we're both people who like to think about things deeply and have a laugh, as people can tell, right? But also take something seriously. But we're a minority in the people and culture space. And what's that been like for you? Your background, but being in a place where you just said HR, what I prefer to call people and culture, like, and can end up being the least psychological, ironically.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you think about it in terms of personality types, my experience, and again, just to caveat, I think you can sometimes see this change in certain pockets, but generally, I think this is still true, is that HR is a very compliance-driven function. So if it were to reflect a part of the, I don't know, almost like an organization is like a body that has different facets and different dimensions to its personality, or our brain has an aspect that, you know, controls impulse, or our brain has an aspect that mediates expression and sensors. Or I think HR, it kind of feels like that part of the brain that still feels like it's very heavily weighted in that sort of compliance area. My challenge has always been that I'm naturally a psychologist, so you would assume that if you understand people, HR is where you belong. But then actually often I'll find much more alignment in marketing, because they're, you know, obsessively thinking about the consumer and the customer in such an intense way because they want to sell. So there's psychologists, and they're driven in a way that they want to increase revenue or get a particular value proposition out there in the market. So there's a sharpness to their psychology, because they're measured against something. They're trying to drive to find that consumer, understand what they want, what they desire, their sentiments. Not always positively, but there's that psychological drive. You know, you can find strong psychological drive in operations teams in terms of their ability to categorize or systematize or create taxonomies or create repeatable processes, or take messy, complex human systems and create order out of them. But yeah, bizarrely in HR, I still feel like we track behind in terms of sometimes attracting the right talent, because, you know, my latest role, I've worked in an HR director role, but I didn't come up through an HR space. But many people, you know, they've been trained in, whether it's doing a particular HR qualification, coming up through the ranks, that's kind of all they know, all they've seen. Sometimes it's about the functions and the types of personalities that they attract. You know, when you decide what kind of career you want to do, you know, there are classically some types of careers where, I don't know, it's highly transactional, it's about money, it attracts a certain type of person. I think
Well,
HR
actually,
attracts
most
probably,
people coming into HR, I find a number of people coming into HR actually have psychology degrees, which is the irony of it as well. In when
yeah,
you
but they
think
didn't
about what
become,
you're saying.
but they didn't become psychologists.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, that's
It's
true.
like,
That's true. And the other thing as well, to be fair, is there's a piece around what the business expects of the HR function.
yes, yeah,
And
yeah.
you know, you'll have CEOs who ultimately will look to the HR team to simply remove costs from the business by running, you know, a sequence of layoffs, whatever, right? And that some teams there are, and no doubt people who may be listening to this who would rather be doing other things than having to constantly do reorganizations of teams,
Yeah,
and would
it's like,
rather think
yeah,
deeply
it's
about.
almost like, yeah, so it's kind of HR, it's less can we create value in people in terms of transforming the culture, the performance in a way that grows the business. HR becomes more, well, we just have a series of like human capital assets that we can put in or take out. Therefore, it's just like, you know, yeah, they're just literally assets to be sweated or stripped.
Yeah, yeah,
Partly part of the challenge here is that, you know, it's a bit like when I was in university, social sciences or psychology, because they're sometimes it's difficult to kind of prove the value of what you're doing or driving, and things in the people or psychological space are quite intangible. And so I think that's sometimes a bit of the challenge, is it's trying to prove the value or the ROI of people related activities, because people are so complex, messy, muddy. You can predict they're going to do something and they'll do the opposite. And so sometimes it's hard because, you know, HR's playing in a space around people where, you know, the most binary way of considering them is that they are assets to be
Mm.
sweated or stripped.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I imagine you'll know it in learning and development. It's that challenge of like, how, you know, the holy grail of, can you actually prove that that particular intervention or that particular nudge or that
Mm.
particular training course actually created behavioral change and drove performance? It's incredibly difficult.
There's a broader context as well. Being in corporate environments, especially the kinds of environments that we've been in, startup type environments, consulting environments. One of the rude awakenings for me was where, I wanted to approach things and think deeply about things. And in some ways, I've been a bit of a corporate philosopher as well. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and actually, there's a level of kind of mercenary pirates. We're just going to move fast and get stuff done. And we haven't really got time to kind of think deeply about certain things. And I had to learn quickly how to have a thought about certain things, but instead of constantly questioning why we're doing certain things, turn that thought into something really practical. That meant there was a process, or there was something people needed to do as a result tomorrow, as opposed to having a kind of a deep discussion about why we should have a different strategy, or what it even means to do. Do you know what I mean? What does it mean to do something, which is quite a philosophical thing. And so it's been, I'll be honest, it's been in some ways challenging to be someone who has deep thoughts about things, but to live in a space where uh, deep thoughts aren't necessarily valued or kind of solicited. And so you then have to very quickly learn how do you take those deep thoughts about things, but how do you translate it in a way that is very operator focused? You told me you had someone who said to you, "Well, Mac, is it that deep?" Do you remember that?
Yeah, no, that was so actually that's a phrase I've used a lot in the corporate environment, which is, it's not that deep. Because, well, there's two angles to it. Sometimes it's not that deep because what we're doing, it's not like critical, like an emergency. We're not doing heart surgery fundamentally. So, like,
Well, Angela,
you know,
I've always had a adverse reaction to that statement, even though, sorry, I know I
no,
jumped
I
in, but
know, I
like, do you know what I mean? Because
but
part of me hates that, but I get it, because from a sense of like, we need to equalize and reduce the
no,
anxiety around
but
things.
just to say, let me caveat that. I'll caveat that by saying, I use that more as a qualifier to suggest you shouldn't be getting overly stressed about certain things or treating people in certain ways when it's
Mhm,
not that
mhm.
deep. So, as an example, you know, I've worked in, it wasn't even a previous life, it wasn't that long ago, but I worked in, like, imagine, like, I don't know, 2014, 15, I'm sitting in, there are these things called MAPA meetings. And it's they're
Maca meetings.
multi-agency public protection. I don't know what the A is, but essentially it's like senior police, senior clinicians sit round. Somebody's going to be released into the community. Somebody killed someone before, and we don't want them killing anyone again. So you put together a multidisciplinary team, and you start to build a formulation, and you start to test and scenario plan around what are the situations within which this person might do something similar. What are the mitigating strategies to reduce their risk? Now, that's a critical conversation. If we don't get this right, that man, woman could be released and literally kill someone. So when I say it's not that deep, that's what I mean. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's an urgency in that context, and there's an acuteness and a power to it, which means there's a certain level of conversation I would expect to have. Now,
Yeah,
maybe there are,
it's not the phrase "it's not that deep" shouldn't be a reason to not be intellectually curious about things.
no, no,
You know.
no. It's more just me saying, let's not run around like headless chickens and start like acting like the world's going to end, because there's a certain extent to which this is a job. You know, we're
Agreed. Yeah,
employees.
yeah.
Yeah, yes, there's maybe a value that our business creates for the world, granted. But often it may just be, you know, a home appliance, or it may just be a piece of software, or it may just be, I don't know, um, AI infrastructure. It's like, all I'm saying is, I'm not. It's like all I'm saying is, it's like it's that
AI
thing of just.
infrastructure is really important. I'm not biased. I'm not biased.
It's funny whenever I've
Yeah,
been in workplaces.
perspective.
What I think it's perspective. Also, remember, it's partly because of I've been in some really high octane environments where it is kind of life and death. So you always joke with me about, whenever I'm in a workplace, people sometimes see me kind of like sauntering around like I look chilled. It's because I am chilled because
Yeah.
it's, you can have intensity around sometimes workload, intensity around an intellectual challenge you're solving, but I don't carry in a corporate environment the gravity that I carried in a health environment.
Mm,
Does that make
yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it
That's
does.
why
It
I
does make
say it's
sense.
not that deep.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
But
And
the curious thing is the interesting I was challenged about recently was I was talking to a mentor and I was talking about corporate life and I was just saying, oh, is there more, you know, what am I going to do this for the next like 20 years and then that's it? Um, and this, I mean, I love good mentors because this mentor challenged me and he said, Mac, I disagree with you there. He said, it is that deep for some people. He said, for some people, actually, that's what deep is, and they're happy with that. He said, you're not happy with that. Therefore, you need to find what is that level of depth as meaning for you. Because otherwise, you're going to constantly butt heads with people because they just don't want to. They don't want to go there. They don't want to move into that territory. It's like being in a pool and everyone's in the shallow end, and you're like, oh, let's go in the deep end. Come on, let's go in the deep end. It's like, well, I don't want to go in the deep end. I'm happy here, and I'm living my life here, and so I think sometimes when I talk about it's not that deep, it's also probably a message to me around finding similarly deep people. So like when I talk to Manfred Ketzer again, there's a similar depth, there's a similar training, there's a similar perspective on the world. And again, for me, it's not going deep for the sake of um intellectualizing. It's going deep because you can solve some incredible
exactly.
problems and create
Exactly.
and see creatures you've never seen. When you go into the
Hmm.
deep depths of the sea, you see stuff that's like science fiction.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, for me, it's the same for me also. It's you've got some people who like the sound of their own voice and just want to wax lyrical when they're in meetings and show everything that they happen to know about a subject. And then you've got people who are just very academic and they're just used to operating in kind of certain academic environments. I want to solve the right problems,
Yeah.
and I want to solve
Yeah.
problems in a way that are really going to make a difference. And
Totally.
so, in order to do that, you need to understand the problem itself. It's like, Gary Stevenson, who I listen to often, an economist who prides himself in the ability to predict what's going to happen, whatever people make of his kind of background. He definitely has credentials in that space, and he talks about his ability to predict economics and wealth
Yes.
inequality and things like that stems from his understanding of the subject and his understanding of the arena. And I think similarly, when we're talking about organizations and people and business, like the ability to demonstrate that understanding, or at least to pursue that understanding, for me is important, not in and of itself, but
I
because
totally
it
agree.
can
Totally agree.
generate results that are actually going to make a difference.
Well, and look, and it's interesting here because it comes on to this, this conversation about diversity of thought. I remember reading about, they've done studies that show that if you're trying to build something repeatable that you know how to build. So if it's like a suspension bridge, we want to build it in London and it was built in Bristol and it's the same conditions, same parameters. Don't go deep. Just take the manual and execute it
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
just deliver that in a sequence. If you come across something that you cannot understand and that has a degree of complexity to it, you have to go deep. And deep might not be necessarily layers down, it may be layers across. So you may need to smash together ideas from different functions and different areas. It could be horizontal depth and breadth as well as depth. But I don't think our society, the way we're educated, the way we're trained, and the way our organizations are established and set up, that we're good at being able to embrace people that can do that.
Mm. Well, or you will have, like private sector organizations that will incubate that will have a small team of
Yes.
either PhDs or innovators who they're left to decide to do that kind of work.
Maybe they don't meet with the commercial function, actually figure out how to take that idea to market, commercialize it, build a business model around it. They just they exist in silos.
Yeah. And it's interesting because recently, as of this recording, this was last week, there was this whole Twitter storm. Marc Andreessen, part of A16Z, Andreessen and Horowitz, well-known VC outfit. Marc Andreessen was on a podcast, and I've actually brought up the tweet here, or do we call it an X? I still call it a tweet. I don't care, an X.
Exit.
Exit. And the post says, great men of history had little to no introspection. So, we've been talking about depth and introspection. And the personality that builds empires is not the same personality that sits around quietly questioning itself. Marc Andreessen and I discuss what we both noticed, but no one talks about. David, the podcast host, says, you don't have any levels of introspection. Marc says, yes, 0, as little as possible. Why? Marc says, move forward, go. I found people who dwell in the past get stuck in the past. It's a real problem, and it's a problem at work, and it's a problem at home. Sam Walton didn't wake up thinking about his internal self. I believe he's the founder of Walmart, right? Or the CEO. He just woke up and was like, I like building Walmart. I'm going to keep building Walmart. I'm going to make more Walmarts. And he just kept doing it over and over again. If you go back 400 years, Marc says, it never would have occurred to anyone to be introspective. All the modern conceptions around introspection and therapy and all the things that kind of result from that are a kind of manufacture of the 1910s and 1920s. And here is the killer quote that everyone's been talking about. Great men of history didn't sit around doing this stuff.
Plato, Socrates. So what? We didn't have ancient philosophers.
According to Marc, they wouldn't be classified as great men. I suspect.
I think this there's a concept around what greatness is. I mean, God bless the people that made Walmart, but I really don't think, in 1,000 years' time, people are going to be looking at history books going, "Oh, Walmart, thank you." I mean, It's what we conceptualize by greatness. Greatness being an empire. Most of our empires, whether it's business or whether it's geopolitical, are monstrous. What impact have they really had on the world? What benefit have they really had on the world? This is the challenge. It's around how you conceptualize greatness. If you're talking about building a huge economic machine that creates revenue for shareholders and is highly profitable and has great margins and, I don't know, consumes an entire market and sector, like, okay, fine, that's greatness. But I think we have to question whether all that stuff is is that really the goal of all this?
Yeah, I had a similar reaction, and I posted something on LinkedIn. And I have a certain level of sympathy for what he's saying and agreement with what he's saying on one hand. Like, he comes from a VC, venture capitalist, kind of really Silicon Valley operator context where there is just this bias to action, and that's how you build things. He's also written some books, or at least Ben Horowitz has, which talks about culture is not what you say. Culture is not what you say, it's what you do, or something like that. You read, there's an article called the Techno Optimist Manifesto. If anyone hasn't read that, check it out, because in that, and ironically, most philosophers have a kind of a project. When you read their writings across the span of time, you can see the elements and the shoots of that project. And for Andreessen and Horowitz, I think that project is around the power of agency as something that triumphs anything else. And if anything gets in the way of agency, then it's a problem. And so if you're in a Silicon Valley context, I kind of get what he's saying. The issue is that he's generalized that across all society. Yeah. And to your point, for me, the question is, well, as you say, like, first of all, who is great? Would you know someone is great if they hit you in the face? Yeah. And then thirdly, what ought to be our orientation to the self? And what I mean by that last one, and then I'll shut up, is that Marc Andreessen was challenging this notion of therapy being the dominant or therapeutic analysis being the dominant lens through which we view the self. And for him, it's like, well, narcissism, neuroticism, and what he calls thumb sucking are like the kind of holy trinity of, you know, or the Machiavellian, what's the sort of the dark triad of our day, right? So for him. And so he's like, well, that isn't the thing that is going to build great empires. So
yeah, true,
I see what he's saying, but yeah, go.
Yeah, I mean, look, part of the challenge here is that anyone that's created content is trying to get some sort of, you know, clickbait.
Yeah, he's trolling. He's trolling as well, right? Yeah,
you know, exactly. Yeah. So, but I do think, I mean, look, I'm trained in psychoanalysis, and it's probably the most introspective like modality, kind of like, you know, mode of thought in, I don't know, I want to say in the sort of like, in all kind of forms of knowledge, psychoanalysis kind of trumps it all for introspection. And interestingly, even when I came up through psychoanalysis, I had a problem that, like, with some therapists who kind of invited people to do therapy for therapy's sake. So there are people who go into analysis and they're in it for like 5 years, twice a week, and they're on the couch and they're just almost looking around for stuff. Like my personal perspective, and even the reason I got into psychotherapy, was because there were things in my life I couldn't explain that were causing me issues. There were things in society that I couldn't understand. And I knew intuitively I had to go under to figure out what they were attached to, what were they rooted to. And so the introspection came from a place of seeing something symptomatic and then deciding to go under, get to the root of it, so that actually, you know, my life could flourish, and then ultimately the life of my, you know, my patients, my clients can flourish as well. So it's introspection, but with a purpose. But there are, you know, there are therapists, or there is a type of person that pursue, again, I would call it sort of this intellectual masturbation, you know, for what end?
Yeah.
Nothing's being created through the thought, except for, you know, I'm not going to get graphic here.
But, you know, what's that suffragettes? Someone mentioned it today. I was running a leadership seminar for women at NSCO, and someone mentioned the suffragettes quote, which was deeds not words, or something like that, is a kind of suffragettes line. There's a false dichotomy that some people are making in the whole thing of introspection, because to take action without any thought clearly doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's why we're in the trouble that we're in some ways across the world. But what I guess Marc Andreessen would argue, he's not arguing against thought. He's not saying people should commit intellectual suicide and never have a thought. I think he's talking about this preoccupation with looking inwards, and this preoccupation with kind of criticizing the self. It wasn't Freud who said sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, or
but even, you know, like if we go back to Freud as an example, like the idea of the unconscious, the idea that there is another realm, another conversation, another dynamic that's occurring. I think, well, definitely businesses and corporates are really bad at being able to analyze and look at that kind of second conversation that is sometimes happening within their midst. That ability to go deep, that ability to kind of figure out, could there be something else going on under the surface here that's leading to these challenges, these issues? And again, many of these things that impact business and impact business outcomes.
And the ability to go ahead.
Yeah, no, but to your point, I think there's a proliferation of kind of values connected to Silicon Valley and startups, which are valuable, like whether it's like, you know, creating a minimal viable product, or whether it's having agility, or whether it's, you know, doing sprints and moving fast and breaking things. Like there's a lot of value in these thoughts in terms of getting an idea into the market to test it with the consumer. Like in that context, great. But then, you know, if you're releasing a certain type of product, you're going to have to think a bit more if maybe the impacts could be damaging. We've gone really fast with social media. Oh my goodness, what's happened? We're going fast with AI. There are horrors that are going to happen and are starting to happen in terms of AI, its misuses. So the thing here is it's about context. So there are certain cultural values which are great within a particular function of a business, or they're particularly useful if you're going to market with a particular product where maybe the risk level is lower. But when you just broad brushstroke that across everything, you basically end up creating unnecessary collateral damage because you didn't think through the implications. And then you can end up spending more time cleaning up. Right now in society, we're in a big cleanup. And yet, when it comes to AI, we're still rushing forward as if we didn't learn anything from digitalization and the huge impacts of the internet, social media on our children, our society, and everything else. We're just still running around like you can just take action. But unfortunately, the commercial engine and the commercial machine swarms around these areas because people are looking for value, and then they just run at it and they just kind of run forward. And I think that's my kind of, it's a lack of, I think we're here because of a lack of introspection.
There's this very poignant short video of Jeff Bezos and William Shatner. Jeff was, I say Jeff like he's a friend. I mean,
J boy,
JB.
J dog,
J dog,
yo, J dog.
When I think it was a flight to Mars or some kind of, and there's this video, people can search online. It's William Shatner speaking to Jeff Bezos and trying to explain the sadness he had going into space, looking at Earth, at what humanity is doing to Earth. To your point, how the results are showing up in terms of the impact on Earth. And he was you can tell he was getting into something deep and important to him. And Jeff Bezos sort of, he interrupted him, and someone was popping some champagne. He said, hey, give me that champagne, and interrupted Will kind of mid-sentence. And Will Shatner was there like, I was just about to get into something deep. He gets the champagne and everyone starts spraying the champagne, laughing or whatever. Hilarious. And then he kind of turns around. It's almost like, where were you again, sort of thing. And it's a
Wow.
The video is such a writ large kind of symbolically represents what was going on in that thread around introspection, because there is Jeff Bezos, maybe then the richest man in the world, I don't know. And William Shatner, who we all know and is respected, and about to have share something that was quite thoughtful. And it was like, not on my party. You're spoiling my party.
What's fascinating about this is, if you were to kind of boil down what psychoanalysis is, it's about some things going wrong on the surface.
Yeah.
And there's normally something intolerable underneath the surface that no one can name, no one can explore, and it's showing up in the symptom. Therefore, you go under to deconstruct and understand it, so it starts to show up more positively, healthily. But in that example, it's fascinating because it's almost it's that similar kind of picture of Shatner's trying to surface something potentially intolerable, and then Bezos sprays over it with champagne.
Yeah. I mean,
and shuts
you
it down.
couldn't get a more apt picture of where we are. That is. Yeah.
And what's happening in our world at the moment, whether it's like we spray champagne over problems, we spray champagnes over human crises, geopolitical conflict, like we just spray champagne over it. And so we do need to put the champagne bottle and have a bit of introspection, and figuratively speaking, have a chat to Shatner, because we need to have a word of ourselves right now.
Yeah. Bro, this has been great. Our first chat with the new season.
This is good. And it's funny actually, because I'm actually just about to jump off to.
Yeah, this is the only reason why we're stopping is.
Well, I know I'm jumping off to open up an introspective space for someone who their life's blown up, and they need to go deep to get under the ground and figure out what's this, where are the weeds, where are the roots, where are the...
So Mac, 2 minutes. Okay, so on that, going into that, so Mac is literally about to go into a therapy session. I know you can't reveal anything at all, but
his name is Jeff. Some people know him as J Dog.
So before you speak to Bezos, how are you preparing to go into this conversation?
I don't prepare. So similarly today, we've had a really rich conversation, and in therapeutic terms, we call it free association. It's this notion that if you just roll with a conversation with a lack of censorship, you'll arrive somewhere useful. So we've arrived somewhere useful at that. Bezos, Shatner,
Just
picture, you know. But
yeah, you've got to
when
trust the process, right?
literally trust the process. So when I go into this session, I've got a sense of things I want to work on with this guy. I've got a sense of things I need to pick up on, but I'm also just going to create space to see what bubbles up. And when I start to see the bubbles emerge, then we dive together and understand where those bubbles are emerging from.
Love it. Love it. Thanks, bro. It's a great place to end. I don't want to hold you up from Jeff. I'm sure he's paying you a handsome sum. Let's do this again. I want to do this more often.
Thanks definitely.
jumping on.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Mac.
Thanks so much.